I don't even know if this is okay to post here, but after 2 years, I finally feel like I can talk about it. This is a bit of a wild one, but unfortunately, 100% true. In 2018, I ended up in a small town that didn't have very much in it, and it was pretty separated from everything, with a friend that I hadn't seen in about 11 years. I was staying at this friend's parents' house with a friend while I was there, which was fine, of course. Well, until it wasn't. I woke up in the morning and friend had gone to work, leaving me with parent for the day. I sat with them and talked for a while before they offered me some water. I accepted and they poured it from a jug because
City water is so bad for you, so I get well water from my sister.
all was good, but I found the water a bit odd. But I'm from the big city and not really exposed to well water, so I assumed it was the difference. I should mention that I spend my time watching people and their body language, micro expressions, etc. in conversation, because I find it interesting, and over time I noticed a bit of a shift. Parents started saying things like,
The world is a cruel place for beautiful people like you, but we won't ever be.
and talking about how they'll always be there for me, how they'll keep me safe, how they hope I spend a lot of time there, even though I live 8 hours away. I also realized that these statements were lining up with when I was taking sips of water. I told myself I was being paranoid, and parent was insisting I drink water while talking because they were being a parent, fretting over health and stuff. That's why they wanted me to drink the water from the well, you know? I did get a weird feeling from what I assumed was anxiety about a new place. So when parent was gone to do something, I poured it out, got a new glass, refilled it with tap water, and sat back in my spot. This water was used for everything throughout the day. Coffee, well water. Cooking or steaming food cooked for me, well water. The conversation kept bouncing back to those statements while I ate and such, but again, just nerves. Later in the evening, parents started talking about other things, like how the government wanted their secrets because they found a way to cure terminal illnesses, which I honestly don't have an issue with. Sometimes people think things that aren't common. And then it abruptly switched to how their ex-partner stole their other 2 kids by using chemical hypnosis to poison them against parent. Okay, this was getting strange, so I contacted my parents and asked if they'd switch my travel ticket to ASAP because my bad feeling was getting worse. I left my phone unattended while I washed my hair, and then friend came home. I felt better afterwards and sat in the kitchen with them, feeling kind of ridiculous for being nervous about well water and uncommon ideas. Until parent filled friend's water bottle with tap water. That was it for me. I said I was tired and locked myself in the bedroom until the morning, when I walked into the kitchen and told them that I was leaving in 3 hours because of a family emergency. I was paranoid for days. I actually have witnesses to the fact that every time I talked about it, my phone would ring with a number from the area code. The first time was a coincidence. The next 3 weren't. I also got a text from a number I'd never seen that said, "Hey, Opathy, do you have time to chat?" I asked who it was and they immediately said that they had the wrong number. Except my name isn't common and the spelling is even less so. I handed my company the phone and they told me I needed to talk to someone about what was happening because this wasn't normal and crossing into serious worry territory. I saw my psychologist a few days later and her exact words were,
Did you get blood tests when you got back? You should have gotten a blood test.
She told me the behavior lines up with drugging someone. I was to monitor my mental health for worsening paranoia and/or psychosis, and to go to a hospital if anything out of the ordinary happened, because it was way too late for any info to come up in a test. I had tech people run diagnostics on my phone, and there were 2 programs I definitely never downloaded, like actually download it into a file that doesn't show up normally. I don't know how to explain it properly. So, we fully factory reset my device and I changed my number. This is even more unsettling because I run virus scans on my devices unnecessarily often, and nothing came up before they did some digging. I haven't heard from friends since, and I haven't reached out. I'm healthy and sober with my mental health under control, but this still makes me so nervous to talk about. This is actually the first time I've ever talked about it openly on the internet, and I'm definitely nervous something will happen, but I've moved twice and changed all of my accounts, gotten a new phone, and changed my codes and passwords every 3 weeks. When I just finished college, I was living in a 1-bedroom townhouse split. I met a guy on Plenty of Fish, and at that time, I wasn't exactly smart about my online digital footprint. Not like I've really changed, but at least now I'm not as ridiculous. Anyways, he seemed like a decent guy. He was really good looking, said he had a good job, nice teeth, don't judge me, and looked like he cared about his personal health. All things I would typically look for in a guy. I'm not a shallow human, but I like to be presentable, and if I'm with someone, I would like them to care about being presentable in a business environment also. After about a week of chatting online, we agreed to meet. We met at a restaurant downtown, which was really far from where I lived. When I got there, I noticed him standing at the door. We sat down to eat, and the evening went great. At the end of the date, we said bye, and I got into my car and began to drive away. I realized right away that he was following me. Because of the distance to my house, I wasn't immediately scared because it's a big city. Maybe he'll turn off the freeway. He didn't. My exit was coming up, and I decided not to take it. I kept driving. I circled the entire city on the freeway, and he stayed right behind me. I was starting to panic a bit, so I decided to go to my friend's house instead of mine, and when I pulled out the exit, I noticed that he didn't. So I had a little bit of a moment to breathe and decided, okay, screw it, I'll just go home. I took the off-ramp back to the freeway and began going back to my exit. I got home and showered and was getting ready for bed, and I started feeling dumb because, was that really him? Am I overreacting? Do I ask him if he was following me? Just a number of things were racing through my overactive imagination, or so I thought. I decided I was going to message him and just say, "Had a good time, good night." And when I started typing, all of a sudden, a message came through to my phone of a picture of my car outside my house. I nearly died. My heart jumped out of my chest. I started shaking. I didn't know what to say. And he texts me and says,
I didn't know you lived across the street from me.
"I've met my neighbors, and not once have I ever met him. There's a huge apartment complex kitty corner to my townhouse, so maybe that's where he lived. I don't know." I popped up and went to look outside, and there he was, just standing there outside, like he was waiting for me. I opened the door, and he asked if he could come in, and if I wanted to still hang out. I told him I was exhausted, and I'd rather just crash out as it had been a long day. The next morning, I woke up to go to work, and my windshield had been smashed. My car was keyed, my back 2 tires were slashed. And as I was noticing the damage to my vehicle, the guy comes out of his car with 2 coffees and is like,
Oh, I thought I'd surprise you with a morning coffee.
So again, I'm freaked out. I called the cops and reported the damage to my vehicle. This guy offered to drive me, and something in my gut was like, don't get in that car. So I called my boss and told him the situation and explained that I wasn't going to be there until after the police came. This guy just hung out the whole time, by the way. When police finally got there, the guy was acting really suspicious. He walked away and was hiding on the other side of his car. I filed the report. The police basically said, "Hope you have insurance," and were on their way to leave. They pulled around the corner, and all I heard was the siren on the cop's lights turn on, and the cops scream,
Freeze! Put your hands in the air and get down on your knees.
I look, and the cop's got his gun drawn at this guy, and this dude's like on the ground getting arrested. I spoke with the cop after he got into the back, and he explained that he was wanted for stalking, breach of probation, assault with a deadly weapon, fraud, and aggravated sexual assault. I was shook. It took me a couple of days to get over the hypothetical situations that could have happened. About a week later, I was on my way out the door, and guess who was sitting in my driveway? We live in Canada, so essentially you're released on conditions until you go to jail. I told him I was late for work, but that I'd call him when I was done work. I never went to work that day. I went and found a new apartment on another area of the city. I also changed my phone number and hired my friend's husband and his friends to go pack up my apartment and move it to their place for a month, and then move it to my new place, because I was so scared this dude would follow them while moving. So that's my horror story of the first time I used plenty of fish. Let's call her Sam. All throughout high school, and even for a bit afterwards, we were best friends. Even though we were best friends, I felt like I didn't really know her, if that makes sense. We were pretty wild teenagers, drinking, smoking, hanging out with older guys, ew, I know, etc. Sam always dated super sketchy guys. When we were 16, Sam started dating a 27-year-old named John. Disgusting, I know. I had my fair share of dating guys way too old for me as well, though, so I didn't see anything wrong with it. Also, predators have a special way of making you feel like there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. I have my fair share of trauma due to older men from that time in my life, but that's a story for another time. She didn't have a car at the time, so she would regularly ask me to drop her off at his place to hang out, and cover for her if her mom contacted me, because this relationship was obviously hidden from her mom. Being an idiot teenager, I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, she's my homegirl, and I know that she would do the same for me. Plus, I'd met John several times before, and he seemed decent enough at the time. Please keep in mind that I was also a teenager at the time, and obviously I realize that he's a predator now. He would give us alcohol and stuff and invite us over to party with his equally disgusting friends. Their relationship seemed fine at first, but it turned toxic within a few months. I mean, duh, he was a grown man, manipulating a little girl. He would constantly demand to track her phone location and control what she wore. He also cheated on her multiple times, but she always stayed. During the time this happened, I stopped driving her to see him. One time, she called me begging to drive her to see him. I said no. She went on to explain that he was drunk, and if I wouldn't, then he would pick her up, and if they got into a crash due to drunk driving, it would be my fault. So, I drove her to his house. I was furious with John at this point for hurting my best friend, and had a rebellious teenage, give-no-fucks attitude. So as soon as I walked into his house to drop Sam off, I started screaming at him for being a manipulative piece of shit. His response and the dark, twisted, yet emotionless look in his eyes still give me chills to this day.
I could break your neck so easily.
Thankfully, I was standing right by the front door, so I ran out to my car and immediately sped off. The next couple years are kind of fuzzy. Also, I asked Sam to stop talking to me about John because I was sick of hearing about him. But basically, they were constantly breaking up and getting back together. Sam dated a string of other guys, but would always cheat on them with John. When we were 18, this is when things started getting progressively weirder, and I started to distance myself from Sam because of it. Long story short, Sam had a boyfriend who she seemed crazy about, and I was so relieved because she finally seemed over John. Then, she heard through the grapevine that John got engaged, and she became irate. We were hanging out when she heard the news, and she was like, "I just have to go home and process this." So she immediately left, and I was like, whatever, I'll give her space. She calls me a few hours later and was talking super fast and laughing a lot. I was like, "You good?" And she was like, "Yeah, I just broke into John's apartment and smashed all of his shit. I know that I have this new guy that I'm dating, but I've been hooking up with John still. Don't hate me, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but anyways, I feel so great. I broke his TV and cut up all his sheets. Too bad John and his fiancée weren't home." I'd never seen her act like this before and was so alarmed. What would she have done if they were home? The break-in was never reported to the police because she told John it was her, and if he went to the police, John's fiancé likely would have found out that he was cheating on her with Sam. Now, at this point, a smart person would completely cut her off, but I didn't. I stopped hanging out with her as much, and we naturally grew a bit distant because I had moved across the country for college, but we would text and FaceTime every couple of weeks. So, at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, what about the murder? Hang tight, we're almost there. In 2018, John's fiancée was found dead. The police immediately ruled it as a suicide because there was a note and the gun was found in her hand, but all of her friends and family insisted that she would never do that. I know this because I had a few mutual friends with his fiancée, and it was understandably all that anyone could talk about. She was known to everybody as being extremely positive and cheerful. They pressured the cops to investigate more, and lo and behold, 1 year later, John was found guilty of murdering her. Thanks for that, cops. He's currently in prison, and it chills me to the bone knowing that I was in his house on multiple occasions and used to frequently hang out with him. So now moving on to why I think my friend may have had something to do with it. Last year, she was visiting my city and asked to meet up for dinner. I was like, sure, why not? We're gonna be in a public place, and I do miss her, and it would be nice to catch up. While we were at dinner, she had her phone on the table, and I saw a call from the name Jail ringing onto her phone. She quickly excused herself to take the call and was gone for a couple of minutes. When she got back, I was like, WTF? She explained that she visits John in prison regularly, and they talk on the phone every day. I was like, why? He was found guilty of murder. Why would you want anything to do with him? And she looked me dead in the eyes with a look of pure evil and malice and said, I'm the only one who knows what actually happened. Nobody else knows the truth. I quickly changed the subject and finished my dinner really quickly and made an excuse to leave. I was terrified at this point and had no idea what she was capable of. I hightailed it back to my apartment and blocked her on everything. I haven't spoke to her since. I know this isn't solid proof that she was involved, but her past behavior, the break-in, coupled with that chilling comment and the fact that she regularly visited a convicted murderer in prison, leads me to believe that she had something to do with it. At the very least, she knows much more than she's admitting. Sam, let's never fucking meet again.